Welcome, everybody, to our December Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance. If you're not familiar with us, we are a coalition, and we have several important partners that are part of our coalition. We have the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. We have the Thomas Jefferson Institute for Public Policy, Heritage Action, Americans for Prosperity, Family Foundation, and maybe forgetting one other. We have 6 organizations that are the main partners in this coalition. And then, of course, we're a statewide coalition, and we have close to now 1,000 people that have joined the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance to help support and expand more school options, education options, and strengthening parental rights here in Virginia. And we are very, very fortunate tonight to have one of the leaders in this movement, Virginia Walden Ford. Let me get this up here. Oh, geez. Excuse me, everybody. Too many things on my desktop. Ms. Ford is one of America's leading advocates for parent empowerment. As a student, a mother, an advocate, and a grandmother, Virginia has spent her lifetime fighting to create new educational opportunities for children and families. A native of Little Rock, Arkansas, and the daughter of 2 public school educators, Virginia and her twin sister, Harrietta, were among the first 130 students chosen to desegregate Little Rock's high schools in the mid-1960s. While she was raising her 3 children in Washington, D.C., Virginia was shocked that so many children were forced to attend failing, crumbling schools simply because they lived in the wrong zip code. In fact, she worried that her own son, William, was falling through the cracks of the system that wasn't focused on the best interest of the children. In 1998, she took action, forming a grassroots organization, DC Parents for School Choice. Along with the group of dedicated parents, Virginia went door to door, neighborhood to neighborhood, recruiting and training thousands of other parents to stand up for their children's futures. In 2003, with the support of the national education organizations and lawmakers, Virginia and her courageous group of parent advocates succeeded in convincing Congress and President George W. Bush to enact the nation's first ever Opportunity Scholarship Program for low-income children, a program that set into motion a complete overhaul of Washington, D.C.'s education system. This program provides scholarships for low-income children to attend private schools while boosting federal funding for traditional public schools and public charter schools. Since the program's inception, thousands of students have received opportunity scholarships, and the program boasts a 91% high school graduation rate. After the program's passage, Virginia worked to encourage families to learn more about their school choice options, conducting information sessions across the city. Later, she played a key role in the congressional reauthorization of the program. After winning several awards for her advocacy efforts, Virginia shared her advice and experiences in her book, Voices, Choices, and Second Chances. Her second book, School Choice, A Legacy to Keep, was published in 2019 and is available on Amazon. And most of us are probably familiar with the movie that was made about her life or her efforts in Washington called Miss Virginia. Miss Virginia, when was that movie produced? I'm trying to remember. I couldn't.
20 it was released 2019.
2019. That's what I thought.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Miss Virginia, go ahead and share with us about your story and advice you would have for us here in Virginia as we try to promote more school options or education options for children.
Well, thank you, Craig, and thank you all for having me here today. I've been excited ever since Craig contacted me. Um, you may not know this, but I went to college in Virginia, and my name is Virginia, so it means a lot to me. I've thought about you all a lot over the years, and wondered what I could do to help. So this works really works for me. Um, I started working as an advocate in the late 1990s. Um, there were several people in Congress that were looking at DC. Congress kind of runs DC, even though we had a local elected officials. And I was a parent that was concerned and worried and attending all the board meetings and going to everything. But there's all of a sudden, there were a group of members of Congress that were looking at what was going on in DC, and that's really how I got into it. And I was asked to testify before the education committee of the House, and I did, and that kind of started me in thinking about what more I could do to make sure that the children in DC were gonna be able to get the kind of education that they deserve. In 1997, I started an organization called DC Parents for School Choice, which was dedicated to talking to parents and training parents to speak out on behalf of their children. And that was a kind of a first. I mean, parents were not accustomed to anybody asking them what they thought. You know, they didn't even understand, it appeared in many cases, that they had a right to even say something about how their children were educated. And what we wanted them to know at that time was that this is your child. We are the first teachers of our children. We know our children better than anybody, and we should have a place at the table. And when it comes to what was going to be in the best interests of our children. And so we began to talk to parents in the community, primarily low income, um, minority communities, African American, and Latino, Hispanics, and but all parents that wanted to be a part of understanding what they could do to support the children. The schools in DC were horrible, and there was a lot of violence. They were way behind as far as reading and math in particular, and test scores were very low. So we knew that we needed to get everybody together to come together to talk about what can we do to help our kids do better in school. We were seeing, I believe at that time it was a 51% dropout rate, and the pregnancy rate in teenage girls was extremely high. So our kids were just leaving schools, but they were leaving school because they believed school didn't matter, or that nobody cared about them, so why should they even stay there? So the more I heard about those things, the really angrier I got. I have three children. Two at that time were in DC public schools. One at that time was in and out of school. William, he was having so many difficulties. My older kids found a way to um, learn, but William is one of those children who, you need to be there for him. And I watched him more and more begin to fail in schools. And that's when I really started thinking about getting involved. But I was a parent, and a low income parent at that, and nobody listened to me. And most of the time I got dismissed. And I just really believed that, you know, I could do more, but I had to find people that would listen. I had to find people that would support what I was saying. I had to find people that cared about my child, or their children, or all children. But what I did was got together with a group of parents who were just like me, who were struggling, who were getting dismissed from schools when they complained or tried to do anything on behalf of their children. And those group of parents, about 50 of us, got together and began to talk to anybody that would listen. We would show up everywhere. We would go to fairs and put up a table. We would go to meetings in all 50 of us. What we were learning at that time was that the more people we had there, the more people seemed to listen to us. So we went with scores of people we could convince. And the best thing I learned about this, they told us at the beginning that nobody would support what we were doing, and nobody would be there for us. And what I learned is, if you stand shoulder to shoulder and show respect for people, and you tell them you want to work with them and not against them, people will show up. And so we began to build a parent force. We called it an army. and we were real dramatic. And so we said, we're building our army and we're the front line, so don't mess with us kind of attitude. And in reality, we were unsure of what to do, but we had seen, as I said, that the more people you had around, the more people listened to you. So we built an army, 50, 100, 1,000, 2,000, and we went to Capitol Hill. And we, if you saw the movie, the the member of Congress that's portrayed in the movie is kind of a one person, but it was a lot of people. You know, it's kind of all put together. And so we went to several members of Congress and said to them, "What can you do to help us? You know, our children are failing. Our children are dropping out in enormous rates. What can we do?" And many of them said, "We're not interested. You know, we're Congress. You don't vote for us. We don't have anything to do with DC." And so we had to learn how to say to them, "But you have children in your state, so you do have something to do with DC." Matter of fact, a member, a representative from Virginia, um, Tom Davis, was really supportive of our work at the beginning. And so that began my interest in what was going on in Virginia as well. But so we got together and we talked to members of Congress and we told them how we felt. Some began to open the doors for us, others didn't. The people that I had thought would open the doors easily with a Congressional Black Caucus, which closed us out entirely. And that was hard for us because we were two-thirds African American mothers, and to not be listened to by African American legislators was really difficult for us. But then we learned that there were other people that would listen to us. So we went to Congress, we went to the Hill every day. We met with members of Congress. If we didn't have appointments, sometimes we just signed the guest book. If somebody walked in and saw us, sometimes they talked to us, sometimes they wouldn't. It took a lot of persistence, and I say to them, well, I'm stubborn anyway, and so I was gonna make a difference if it was the last thing in the world that I did, but I had to persuade parents that we had to fight hard. You know, we had to be soldiers. You know, we had to make sure that people were listening to what we had to say because we had every right to say that. You know, when I look at my son, and at that time, he's an adult now and a fine young man, but when I looked at him at that time, what I saw was a smart little boy that I loved that nobody else seemed to care about. And that was unacceptable to me. So I used to tell the parents, um, carry a picture of your child. This was before cell phones, so you couldn't pull up a picture. You had to have a paper picture. Carry a picture of your child in your purse. And every time you get scared or discouraged or unhappy or angry or sad, take that picture out of your purse and look at that child, and it'll change who you are. It'll make a difference in how you feel. It'll make a difference in what you are going to do for that time. Every time I looked at William, I knew why I was fighting. I knew why I was up on Capitol Hill with 50 other people. I knew why some days I'd go home and I would be so sad that nobody heard us, but I kept going. And that's what parents have to do. We have to take our rights. Our right is to help our children. Our right is to protect our children. Our right is to make sure that whatever their needs are, we're able to give them. And we can't do that if we're not willing to fight for it. So we fought through the end of the 90s into 2000. In 2003, we finally had a president that we knew would not veto any legislation that we were able to get passed in President Bush, and so that's why we fought during that time even harder. because he was a big supporter of school choice. He was our friend. You know, he came to meetings in the community. He had us at meetings at the White House, and it was very clear to me that he cared about the kids. So I knew, and my advisors and the people that worked with me knew that if we could get this done in 2003 and get us, then we would be okay. So we fought hard for days and days. The movie, if you've seen it, shows a short period of time, but it was really several years that we fought. And but in 2003, by the end of the year, we were able to get um, a three-sector initiative passed, which was provided money for a scholarship program, a voucher, or whatever you want to call it. It provided money for charter schools, and it provided money for traditional schools, public schools. And so it was finally passed in an omnibus bill. So it was hard fought, hard fought. Passed by one vote. That was correct. And President Bush signed it into law January 24th, 2004. And so our journey as parents was amazing. Many of us, when we look back on this, we can't believe that we even were able to do this. We literally went to the Hill, Capitol Hill, every day, Monday through Thursday, because federal legislators go home on Friday, and so we were there Monday through Thursday from 10 o'clock to 2:30. And many asked us why 10 o'clock. We took the kids to school, then we went to the Hill. We left at 2:30 to come to go get the kids from school, and so that was our time that we were able to talk to anybody that would listen to us. And it was a big, responsibility for this little group of parents. But over time, we did grow. As I said, we grew in the hundreds and thousands. And we had rallies that had thousands of parents show up. And it was an amazing effort. But, I tell parents all the time, it sounds big, it sounds hard, and it was. It had its moments. But when you're doing it for children, it takes away the scary part of it. It makes you want to move forward. It makes you want to do whatever you can to make sure children have everything they need, and that's what we did. And I don't mean to make it sound like a simple thing. It wasn't. It took most of all my life, and and we worked very, very hard. We spent days and days. I remember one time I told my children if they wanted me to stop, I was missing things they were involved in because I was in meetings or in the community or talking to members of Congress or talking to local elected officials. And I said, if you want me to stop, I will, because you all are more important. And my kids said, Ma, you're doing it for us and for future children. No, we don't want you to stop. We want you to fight as hard as you can. Now I have grandchildren. Boy, I'm glad I fought, you know, because my grandchildren are the beneficiaries of a lot of the fighting that we've done. If nothing else, our fight made people sit up and listen to parents, you know. And prior to that, I don't think we were listened to. I think we were listened at. My mom used to say that all the time. Don't be listening at me. Listen to me. Hear what I'm saying. And that's what we taught the parents that were involved in our legislative fight, and any parent. My what I say to parents every day. Somebody says, "Do you have closing word?" My closing word is always use your voice. Be strong. Stand tall. Know that what you're doing will make a difference in your child's life. And as a result of all the fighting, I still stay in touch with some of the kids that started at the beginning of the Opportunity Scholarship Program. And we have doctors and lawyers and um, researchers people. We have a young woman at John Hopkins who is a cancer researcher. And I mean, and these, when I look at the children and who are now 30-year-old adults, I think about when they first came to me, and when their parents first came to me and said, I want to do something so that this child, my child, has an opportunity to soar, to thrive, to do better in life. And I look at them now, and whatever we do as parents, think we should think about all those children that will benefit. I mean, when I'm in DC, people come up to me all the time and say, I remember you and thank you for fighting for my child. Or I have these grown people with children come up to me and say, you fought for me, Miss Virginia, you know. And I say, oh my goodness, you're old, And they introduce their children to me, who are, it's really sweet. And I love that. I do. I love the fact that whatever we do as parents can truly make a difference in the world. And, when you're a girl, you always said, I hope that I find something to do in life that will make a difference. And I don't know if I found this or it found me. I tell my son, who is now 40, I tell him all the time, boy, if you had been a better kid, I would have never done any of this. If you had been nicer and didn't skip school and didn't get in trouble. And he said, yeah, Ma, you really should thank me for this, and we laugh about it. And, you know, but I understand how hard it is for everybody out here now. I talk to hundreds of parents a year. During the pandemic, people just seem to find my number and call me on um, Facebook or wherever they found me, and worried about what you could do for your children. And I believe that if we believe in ourselves, if we believe that we have the ability to fight for our children and truly make a difference, our children will do great. But it's so discouraging sometimes when we see uh, members of legislatures that don't support school choice, or we meet people that don't support school choice. It's really discouraging. I work in a community, in my church is in a community that's very depressed. And I look at the kids, and we run an after school program, our little church does. And I look at those children, and I think, you know, who's going to fight for them? Well, I am. That's why I can't retire. And I'd like to retire, but I won't. And so we just have to keep fighting. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell, a 24-minute nutshell. But I love questions. I'm really good at answering questions. So,
Well, great. Well, we thank you so much. I would like to start with a question. You you mentioned, I mentioned in my in your bio that you had to deal with the Reauthorization Act. Can you talk a little bit about what that was about? Was there a sunset clause, and is there still one, and that they continue to have to reauthorize?
well, yeah, that's funny. No, there was not a sunset clause. Okay, so the program was authorized for 5 years. And so and we were pretty confident. We had 1,000 or 1,100 kids in the first year, and it was growing and growing and growing. So we were confident that it was going to be okay. And when President Obama was elected, one of the first things that his administration announced was getting rid of the Opportunity Scholarship Program, and we were just surprised because um, you can see public housing project from the White House. So who wouldn't want to fight for kids that were the beneficiaries of these kind of programs coming from these kind of areas? So the fight, the reauthorization fight, which people think the first fight was the hardest, the reauthorization fight was the hardest. And because he had announced that they would allow the kids that were in the program to continue, but they weren't going to let any more kids into the program. And we all know that that's what kills a program. And so we knew we couldn't allow that to happen. And there were 213 kids that had been awarded scholarships, and they would they told us that we could not award the scholarships to the children. We could not let any more children. That was what was going to be done. And so we had to, reconnect with parent groups and fight again. And that was a really hard fight. And okay, I'm gonna say this, but we lost that fight. And then the mid-year elections came up, and the and Speaker Boehner told me we're fine. We're gonna get the program back, but we actually did not. Were not successful in changing the president or anybody's mind until after the mid-year elections, and that was what 2009, 10,
And
and 10, and we were able to announce that the program was going to continue. I don't know what the conversation was between President Obama and Speaker Boehner, but he told me, "Don't worry, this program will continue to exist." But it was a real tough fight. That was a tough one. 200 parents took over the grounds of the Department of Education. We protested under the Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, I think, was the Secretary of Education, under his window for 2 weeks, and it was hard. And even people we knew within in the Department of Education told us we needed to stop fighting because we were going to lose. And but we kept on fighting, and so we eventually got it back. That's why sometimes people think the program doesn't exist anymore. It's still going. It's still always in trouble. I go, I spend time in DC talking to parents sometimes. But we celebrate 20 years in January, and
that's
I
amazing.
think that's significant to remember.
That is amazing. Can
It
you tell
is.
us why would President Obama, I mean, what was the impetus behind him not supporting this? I think I know the answer, but I would like to see what your thoughts are on that.
Well, in reality, um, it was. I think it was about money and power. The Democrats had supported him in his election, and I, I understand how that works, and so I think it had more to do with politics and power, and which I just don't accept. I mean, I'm about families and children, so that was difficult. But the Congressional Black Caucus told me that the reason they won't support it is because um, in the 50s and 60s, or in 1957, when Brown versus Board of Education, when the Supreme Court, ruled for us, um, and schools were closed in some southern states, that it was rumored. I was a little girl, so I don't know if it was true, but I was a little girl too. Some people probably weren't even born, but I was a little girl, and there was rumored that white parents were being given money by legislatures or government entities to start private schools. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I know that schools did close. There was a lot of controversy, and there were kids that were unable to go to school. I had to be sent out of the state or sent up north because southern schools primarily was I think 6 southern states, including Arkansas, shut down high schools for a year, and so kids had to leave. So they tried to tell me that they had emotional feelings behind that, and this was just like doing that. Why send our children to private schools when private schools didn't want them, which we found absolutely untrue. So I believe, as emotionally as people want to make it sound, I believe it's about money and politics. I believe that there are politicians that get money from certain places, and if they don't do what they're told to do, they lose out. Now that's my I can say anything I want to because I'm old divorce.
Now that and I think you're right about that. It is about power and politics and money.
Yes.
I recently met with the head of the Black Legislative Caucus here in Virginia, and he didn't tell me it was about racism. He didn't use that story, but although it was true in Virginia, they did start these private schools giving white folks scholarships. So there is truth to that here in Virginia, but that no longer is the truth as you've
Mhm.
demonstrated in Washington D.C. But when you ask these people, well, why wouldn't you want? Because we've geared our programs to help low income children, which are primarily African American children. Why wouldn't they
Mhm.
want to help them? And of course, they're not going to tell you, well, it's about money and power, but that's what it's about. That truly
Yeah,
is.
and they look, Craig, they'll tell you behind the scenes, and don't tell anybody, Virginia, but this is really how I feel. And but what I say to them is, this is not 1966. This is 2023, and we should be having a different attitude about how to help kids, low income, all income. I'm a purist. I believe everybody ought to have opportunity to go where they want to go and have the resources to go there. I was trained by Milton Friedman. And so, now I think it's just become a way to just get people upset and angry and, not wanting to do things. I talk to people all over the country about, how did you really feel, Democrats? Well, I'm not going to say because it would get me in trouble with the party. Or, there are some Republicans out west that won't support us, and
Right.
be- because they don't think they need it. And so I think there are a lot of reasons that people won't support school choice, but none of them, in my opinion, focus on the kids. And so what I say to legislators or anybody else that will listen to me, what is that got to do with a child learning? What can we do to make sure that children are getting what they need educationally? I really don't care whether you get reelected next year, Mr. So and so. I care about whether a child graduates from high school, and I make people mad, and I don't care. And because that's what it's about. I have walked out of meetings where the whole conversation was about politics and money and power, and not one time did they mention children. And I'm going, well, this is not the meeting I want to be in. I'm leaving. So it 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 makes me angry that in 2023, almost 24, we are fighting some of the same fights I fought 20 years ago. When I started this in the 1998 and 97, actually, I never thought I'd be still fighting for kids. And that's why I encourage parents to stand up, fight hard. We got to figure this out because our kids are really suffering from us not figuring it out, and and that's unacceptable to me. I want us to somehow start understanding that whatever we do in the future, we have got to make a better place for the children. And I don't see that happening enough, even though I have seen a lot of movement over the years. And I mean, when I got involved in this, Milwaukee was the only school choice program. And so we've seen, so what they're now 30, 40 that are in existence, plus the District of Columbia. And so I think we have moved forward. But if it were anything else, we would have moved faster. And we have got, as a country, we have got to start thinking about what this is doing to our kids. You know, where the kids going to fall in all of this? And why are we scaring people by alluding to the fact that if you speak out, some will happen to your child or some will happen to you. I mean, this is America. We should be fighting for kids. That should be our priority. Don't care about who gets elected. Don't care about the money they get, except for the scholarship program. Don't care about who's in power. What I care about is whether the little girl that came into my church this afternoon to get a book and a snack, whose name is Zenobia, will be able to do well in school. She's fifth grade. She was picking up books for third graders, and I want her to be picking up books for fifth graders. And That's what we got to worry about. I mean, people sit around talking about what they're worrying about. Well, we got to worry about is the fact that I'm getting older, and the children are going to be running this country one day. Let's give them the right tools to do it. Period.
Yeah, you mentioned a while ago. I'm going to some of the questions now, but you mentioned that it seems like there might have been a grand bargain made with the folks who originally opposed the legislation for the Opportunity Scholarship. You mentioned there was more money for public schools, more money for public schools as well, and then the DC scholarship program. Were you part of those negotiations? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it became very clear to us in the midst of the fight that we weren't going to be able to get just the scholarship program passed. And the initial legislation was just the scholarship program. And so our coalition, and I do believe in coalition, came up with the idea that if we're funding every sector of education delivery in DC, then nobody could get mad. And so the idea was that everybody would get equal funding. So I think the beginning of the legislation, everybody got $20 million, which ain't a lot of money. And the public schools, charter schools, and the scholarship program. And so, it was. I thought, and no, I didn't agree with it at all. I was pretty angry, but I came to believe
Mhm.
that it was right because I did notice that there was a lot less opposition when they they whoever they represented was going to be involved and funded as well. But it was hard for me, because with the initial fight was for the scholarship program, and I wanted everything to go into that. But I came about around, and I realized before it passed, as we were working on it, as it was being written and looked at and talked about, that it was a really good way. I mean, maybe this way there would be less opposition than there was, and we won. But we didn't win by much. I mean, we we didn't win by much. You know, in the House it was one vote, in the Senate it was just a few, and so we were, it was still difficult. And but I wanted it to be the scholarship program, but you learn and you grow. And as I watched what was going on, I felt like this was the appropriate way. And parents, the leadership of the parent groups, people listen, and I remember I used to think, I wish my children listened to me like this because parents would listen. So once you put something out there, you better be clear what you're saying to them. So because people will support what you say if they trust you and if they believe that you are saying the right things and if they believe that you are somebody that cares about what happens to them. So yeah, but it was difficult for me
Mhm.
personally to change from the scholarship program to a three sector initiative,
Yeah.
which is
Well,
what it is
I think that's
and
a lesson for
continues to
us.
be.
I think that's a lesson for us here in Virginia, especially with the new legislature that we have, where we have the Democrats controlling both chambers. Much like what you had a governor or you had a president that was supportive of what you're doing. Our governor is supportive, but how do we have a conversation with those who oppose this and maybe create a grand bargain, as some of my friends have said. Switching gears real quick, again, going to the questions that were submitted prior to the show or to this event. Um, One of the challenges we have is that, I'm clearly an old white guy, and I've been working on this for 8 years and really trying to create a movement within the low income communities because that's where the legislators are that you have to impact. How do you recommend, or what do you recommend we do to try to create that movement in Richmond, Petersburg, Norfolk, where we have the lowest income kids?
I think going into the community is what works. Going in the community with whomever you have, identifying people in the community. One of the things we did was in every African American community I know, there's a lady in the community that keeps the kids, or gives the young mothers advice, or something like that. It's always one in the neighborhood. And we found those people, and we sat down and talked to them about what we were trying to do. And that worked for us. We talked at community centers. We were never pushy or argumentative. We talked to them about what they wanted for their children, what they and over time we identified parents that said, I've been thinking the same thing. So I think that going into any community, sometimes I was the even going into African American communities, I was the only African American. So it wasn't that I you have to have all black women go in there. You just have to have all people that are able to communicate their care and their love for children in the work that they're doing. It's not easy to do, but it can be done, you know. But we went into um, neighborhood fairs or boys and girls clubs, and we talked to parents one on one. And this is something. If you even talking to legislators one on one, ended up being something very positive for us. So we learned early on that to get people to understand what we were trying to do, we needed to be able to sit down and talk to them in a way that touched their hearts, and made them think about their children. I said testified many times, and I said more than one. Each of you have children, you have grandchildren, you have nieces and nephews and little sisters and little brothers. What do you want for them? Well, we want anything. We want the same things for our kids, and I think it was this. This is a really good story. We had a, a chairman of the apportionment committee. He in the House, and his name was Rodney Freelandhouse, and he had been on the news saying that he was not. This was when the scholarship program was just the DC scholarship program. He was not going to support this program, and he was going to encourage others not to support it. So 2 days before the vote, we went to his office, about 50 of us, and asked if we could sign the guest book. We didn't ask to speak to him. We asked if he could sign the guest book. Well, it takes 50 people a long time to sign a guest book. During the time we were signing the book, he came in and he asked his staff who we were. And we said, we're DC parents and we're concerned about what has been reported that you said about the vote for our scholarship program for our kids. And he has the strangest look on his face, but he said to his staff, find me an open conference room, and invited all 50 of us to come in. And for 2 hours, we talked to him about our kids and why we were there and what we wanted. And this is a true story. And then he gave us M&Ms, I think, candy, and we left. The next day, he actually stood up and said, I've had a change of heart. And he voted yes for our scholarship program and encouraged others to vote yes. So we touched his heart. I mean, he looked at us not as a piece of legislation, but as parents who genuinely and wanted the best for their children. He saw us as people. And I think that when we run campaigns that are too political, we think we know everything, and we don't. And when we talk to them as just parents who love their kids, using those words, the book Voices, Choices, and Second Chances that we wrote after the legislative fight that I wrote is kind of a step by step of what we did. I just believe that after the legislation passed and everything, I didn't think that parents who might be interested in and fighting for their kids would understand it from what we saw written in the media and stuff. And so I wrote this book, and I mean, it's got lots of stuff in it telling how we did this, and this was sitting down with parents and saying, "Y'all remember what we did when we went wherever?" And they would say yes, and then were right. And but most of it is heartfelt, and a lot of people criticize me because I'm not a politician. I am a mother. I loved my children. I wanted what was best for William in particular at that time. I would do anything to make sure that that happened. And when you say that to people, people get it. Don't we all love our kids? And then you can explain to them exactly how this works. Dr. Friedman used to tell me, Virginia, stand strong, hold your head up, and say, we have to make changes because this ain't working, you know. And that has stayed with me my entire career. You know, Hearing him and Rose, his wife, tell me just by telling your story, just by making people understand that all you want is the best for William or Maisha or Michael or any of my children, it makes a difference. But going into the community is key. I mean, I remember the coalition wanted to have a group of meetings in the middle of DC at our convention center, and I said they won't come, and they said yes they will. We'll send buses, and we'll pick them up and we'll take them home. And they didn't come. And the reason they didn't come was because it was too far out of their community.
Mm.
It was too, it was going downtown DC, and I imagine in any city, going downtown or going near government buildings or whatever can be really, really kind of throws people off a little bit. So why not we go into the communities and so that's what we did. We walked those streets. We walked so many streets and talked to so many parents, but where they felt safe in their neighborhoods. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Did you did you engage in the clergy at all? Did the faith community um were they supportive of your work?
The little storefront churches that had 50 members were incredibly supportive. The Archdiocese of Washington, they were amazing in their support. Um, but the big churches were not. I
Interesting.
got put out a couple of offices, and but those little churches, you see them on the corner. You see about 50 people coming out on Sunday, kind of like the church I go to here. Those churches were amazing, and their pastors were amazing. And the archdiocese was our partner.
Mhm. Yeah, but that's
But
that.
the big churches in DC, and I don't know how it is in other places, but in DC, a lot of the big churches had federal money, and so they were not going to get involved.
Yeah, they didn't want to.
That's just the truth. They had programs and projects going on in their churches and thousands of members, and they they were looking out for those programs, and I'm sure they should, but they wouldn't even talk to us in most cases. But I go back now, and a lot of them have church schools.
Church schools,
A
right?
lot of those churches that put me out started schools and accept kids from DC Opportunity Scholarship Program. Isn't
Yeah,
that
that's
interesting?
you know Michael Benjamin down in Florida. He said a similar thing
Oh yeah,
happened in Florida when when a funding stream started to become available, churches all of a sudden little schools started popping up in
yeah,
churches. And I think a lot of some pastors are really smart and they go, "Hey, this is an opportunity for a lot of things here. I could get,
it
I got
is.
a building that's empty for 5 days a week. Why not
Mm-hmm.
fill it with 30, 25, 20 kids, whatever it is?"
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Um,
mean, it's amazing. Some of those schools still exist. When I go to DC, there's one school in particular I always drive by. and they still have a sign saying we accept DC Opportunity Scholarship students. And he their pastor during our fight literally told me to leave his office. He didn't want to talk to me, so I get tickled every time I go by there.
Uh,
Always makes me smile.
so we have a question here. Do you know generally what the number of children have been through the DC scholarship program since the inception in 2004?
Uh, Approximately 12,000.
12,000 students.
Yeah,
Wow. Think about all those
yeah,
students that have had the benefit of that. Now that's all kids that have taken a scholarship and gone to private schools, correct?
yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. We have we have
There's a lot of
we
kids.
have, we have on the call here tonight Derek Max, who was very involved with, I think, Cornerstone. Is that correct, Derek?
Oh, I know Cornerstone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was one of the founders of Cornerstone. I know Virginia.
I know Derek. Yeah, mm,
Derek,
Cornerstone was one of my favorite schools.
Derek is very much involved with the VEOA. He's one of our partners, and and he's the one who shared with me a little bit about the grand bargain when that all came down. So that was uh, so that's something that we're going to need to consider considering our political environment, and we're looking at small victories, and that's what we have to do and grow it from there. Virginia has
Yeah,
always been sort of a incremental state. They don't like stepping out big. They want to do things incrementally, and that's we're going to have. That's likely how we're going to have to start, and that's fine. But you get started, right? Because there are so
but
many children that are in desperate need of a good education here in Virginia.
yeah.
So, is there anything else, Miss Virginia, that you would like to share with us? Any kind of words of wisdom, maybe, um,
Well,
to encourage
sure.
you?
My words of wisdom are stay strong. Use your voices. Stand together. Make it about the children. We never take kids out of school, but we always on holidays or in the summer we have kids around. And so that's what I tell parents. Don't let legislators make you afraid. you
Mhm.
know they are human beings. They got wives and childrens and mother-in-laws and kids to get in trouble. I mean, we sometimes look at people like they're bigger than anything in the world, and they're not. They're just people. And the difference is they decided to run for an office that gives them a title, but they still have to go home and discipline their kids and put up a Christmas tree next week and or this week. And I did. And they still have to do all those things. I think when we get that out of our brain, President Bush taught me about this. We were we had an event, and he and I were talking about the scholarship program, and and he and I cut. He said something, and I got excited and cut him off, and so afterwards, one of his staff said, you cut the president of the United States off," and I went, "Oh my God, I did, didn't I?" And he walked up right at that time, and he said, "I'm just a man. I'm just a man." And I went, "Oh, thank you." But I mean, you start thinking about that. Or I'm a twin. So he and I had discussions about his twins, and and it makes you all of a sudden you realize these people are just people. Before they ran for office, they probably did something else. And they had nothing to do with being in the public eye. So just be strong, stay strong. Believe in yourself. Believe that you have every right as an American, as a resident of a city in Virginia, to speak out on behalf of your child. Every right. Nobody should be able to take that away from you. And that's kind of what I say to parents. Even here, even now, I'm helping fight some battles in Arkansas. So I've been saying the same thing to them. But always keep in mind that the most important thing for you to remember, whatever you do, parents, wherever you go, think about your children. Think about carry yourself with grace and dignity, because then your children will say, that was my mother or father, a grandmother or auntie. And that's my message. Stay strong. Use your voice. Speak out.
Well, and that's tremendous encouragement for us because the election in November took some wind out of our sails. We're not changing. We're not changing our mission or our vision. We're moving forward, and we're having to rethink how we go about it. And but we need to stand up, and that's the message we want to get to parents in the communities who need to be standing up for their children. So I truly appreciate that. So thank you so much for your time and your wisdom on this. And it's an amazing story. I encourage everybody to go in and watch Miss Virginia if you haven't seen it. It's a great movie. Also, look at her books. I've already written down on my Christmas list. I want to get that book, Voices, Choices, and Second Chances. I definitely want to read your story and how you guys actually went about this, because I think it applies pretty much everywhere we go. So again, thank you so much. I want to encourage everybody. We do have a petition on our website at www.veoa.org. You put that in, it comes right up. Please sign that petition. We've got hundreds and hundreds of people that have signed the petition. And the more people that sign that petition, the more opportunity we have of letting legislators know that we want more options in education here in Virginia. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I want to thank everybody who's in this movement for their help and their time today over the last year. We're going to be entering into the new year starting January 1st. We have General Assembly starts on January 10th. It is a long session, 2 months, 60 days. These guys and gals are going to be in the General Assembly battling it out. I would like to ask for prayers for everybody in the General Assembly, for the governor as well, and for all those who are going to be down there working hard to try to work for children, and just not on education, but there's so many mental health. There's so many issues that we're challenged with here in our country. So that ends our program tonight. I want to wish everybody a very, very Merry Christmas if you celebrate Christmas, and enjoy your holiday and your time off. Please try to take some time off. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Miss Virginia, so much for your time.
You're so welcome. My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Happy holidays.